Willow, are you hiding under the table? You're supposed to be executive producer. You got to help me. Come on. There you go. All right, give me a high five. Thank you for the high five. Thank you, Miss Willow. All right, you ready? Let's do this. So today I want to talk about budgeting because if you're going to become wealthy, you have to know how to budget. So how do you budget? What is a budget? A budget is basically just how to manage your finances. So you're going to need to gather some information first. You're going to want to get all of your income statements, your bank statements, your bills, your receipts, and all your other financial documents. I do mine in a spreadsheet. There's a lot of fancy tools and apps you can use, but I just use a spreadsheet. It's pretty simple. So the first thing you want to do is put your income down. So all of your income, what you bring home from your primary job, if you have a side hustle, if you have a second job, whatever you do, you want to make sure you capture all of the money coming in for the whole month. And you're just going to list those in a spreadsheet, just in a column. So like for mine, I have my husband's income, my income. If I do any distributions from my companies, I put that in there. If I get any dividends from stocks, I put that in there. And then I sum that up, and that's my total take home income. That's every dime that I receive in my personal checking account every month from my income. Then you're going to want to put all of your expenses. So this is where, for me, it was very helpful to go to my bank statements. And my bank allows me to export my monthly statements as a CSV file so that I can take that and dump that directly into Excel if I choose to. And I take that and I add up all of my gas, add up all of the food, add up everything, and I categorize them and lump sum them into large categories. I'm not going to list Walmart, for example, 15 times. I'm just going to have one line item called Walmart, and I'm going to sum up the monthly expenses at Walmart. Now I'm going to do this over a 3-month period, and I'm going to take the average number of what I spend at Walmart. I'm not going to take the largest amount. I'm not going to take the smallest amount. I'm going to take the average over a 3-month period. I'm going to list all of those expenses, and I'm going to sum that up. So you've got two sum totals, and then you're going to subtract your expenses from your income, and that's going to give you your variance in your bank account. So that's going to tell you how much extra money you have every month on average that you should be able to use to save and to plan for how to build wealth. Because that number is important. Because if you don't tell that number where to go, I promise you it'll just disappear on you. If you don't tell your money where to go, what to do, then it just vanishes. It's like it sprouts legs, walks off, and it's just gone. So you've got to be able to know exactly what you have coming in, exactly what you've got going out, what money you've got left to build wealth with. Do this evaluation periodically. Go through and make sure your averages per month spending for main categories are still average, because you might be able to, over time, have found ways to save money. For example, on food. Maybe you decided, I'm going to cook every night at home. I'm not going to buy food out. I'm not going to go to restaurants. I'm going to cook at home. That's a lot cheaper. So that's going to drop down your food expense. So you want to be able to periodically, like once a quarter, go in and make sure your averages for those expense categories are still the average. You can't build wealth until you are out of debt. So all of your commercial debt, credit cards are the fastest way to make you non-wealthy. You've got to get those paid off. You've got to get those closed out. Now, I understand a FICO score, and I understand the importance of that for getting a low interest rate. So what I do and what I've advised my kids to do is have one credit card, usually through your bank, that you keep long term, and you pay it off in full every month. Now, I do know people, and a friend of mine is able to do this. He has a credit card that he gets airline points on, and he pays everything on this particular airline credit card so that he gets airline miles. Every month, he pays that card off in full. And that's the key, is you have to pay it off in full every month. If you pay the minimum payment, you are still incurring interest. You do not want to do that. You want to pay it off in full every month. And because he did that, actually this week he flew his whole family to Disney. And so his family's in Disney this week, and he used his airline points and his airline miles to be able to fly his family without having to spend additional money. So if you have the self-control, and it really is self-control, you have to force yourself to pay it off in full every month, then that might be an option for you. Most people, it's not an option. Most people, when they use a credit card over cash, overspend, and then at the end of the month, they look at the bill, they look at the balance on the card, and they don't have enough money left in their bank account to pay it in full. So they end up having to incur interest because they pay the minimum payment instead. Or even worse, they don't make the minimum payment. So they get fines and fees in addition to interest. Just please don't do that. If you don't have the self-control, pay it off, close it out, and just use a debit card. It takes a lot of self-control and it takes discipline to be able to stick to a budget and make sure that you are controlling all of your expenses. But it's worth it. I'm not saying you have to live poor. Identify your wants and your needs, and they're going to be different. A need is something you have to have. A want is something you would like to have. And I'm not saying you can never buy a want. I'm just saying prioritize your needs, make sure your needs are taken care of first, then make a conscious decision if you want to spend money on a want. One of the things that I do is if I want to buy something, I will talk to my husband about it. I'll say, hey, I really want to buy this. 9 times out of 10, he'll say, we don't need it. And I'll say, yeah, but I really want it. And I've been very diligent and we've got the extra money. And so I will think about it. I will research. I will really evaluate, do I want this item enough to forego the investment of the money? And sometimes I say yes. For example, last year I bought a new pontoon boat. We live on a lake. We've got a dock. I wanted a boat. And so I bought a boat. I don't feel guilty about that choice because, again, I discussed it. I thought about it. I researched. I waited before buying that boat for 2 months. So I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly what I was willing to pay for it. The negotiation with the dealership was very simple because I had done all of that in advance. And I was very clear. This is the boat I want to buy. This is what I'm willing to pay for it. Can you make it happen? And sure enough, they were able to make it happen for me. So we were able to buy the boat. So again, I'm not saying you can't ever do something you want to do or do something that gives you joy and fulfillment, but don't do it every week. Don't do it every month. Try to forego I'll just use the example, being women, a lot of women I know are into beauty items. I was never cursed with beauty. I was blessed being the girl next door. I don't buy wrinkle cream. I don't dye my hair. I don't get my nails done. Never had a mani-pedi. I don't buy expensive clothes. I don't buy expensive shoes. I don't buy expensive purses. So I just forgo all of that. Now, I know that's something that not every woman is going to want to do. I completely understand. I have a friend who loves getting her nails done, and that's something that she enjoys. It's important to her, and she feels good having, really nice nails. And I can understand that. Her and her husband are debt free. She works full time and has a part-time job. He works full time and has a part-time job. They don't have any kids, so they have extra disposable income, and she chooses to make the conscious decision to get her nails done every week. And I completely support that. They're already debt free. They're living modest lives because they choose to live modest lives. Could they ramp up? Absolutely. There are so many housing companies out there that will say, hey, we'll build on your land. So they could do that. She is like, I don't have the desire. A bigger house means I got to take more time cleaning. And so for her, it's more important to have her time and not be spending the time cleaning and forego having a larger house because of that. And I completely support that. I will say that when I bought this house, I did not want this house. I did not. I wanted to buy a small cabin on the lake, 1,200 square foot max size, a small cabin, go in, remodel it. And my husband and I, we raised 4 kids, but they're all out of the house. They don't live with us anymore. We had the opportunity to look at this house, which is 5,000 square foot, and it's on about an acre lot. It's got 255 foot of shoreline. So it is a great house. It's a great lot, but I didn't want 5,000 square foot to have to maintain and clean. Heck, just decorate. We've got 3 rooms right now that I just shut the door and never open them. because I don't want to take the time and the expense to decorate rooms that we don't need, that we don't use. So I just close them off, don't heat and cool them, and they're just kind of sitting stagnant right now. Will I at some point get around to doing something with those rooms? Yes, I am. One of the things that my husband and I are talking about is turning one of the spare bedrooms into a filming room, so that instead of me sitting at my dining room table, I can have a designated filming room set up for us to where I can walk in, push a button, present what information I want to present, push a button, and then walk out of the room, shut the door. And then when he gets time, he can go in there and he'll have his editing computer set up and he'll be able to edit right there and it'll be easier for us. So that's one of the things we're looking at doing in the future. So now that you've got a budget, now that you know what comes in and what goes out on average every month, and you know how much money you've got left over, then you've got to set your financial goals. So, what do you want to do with that money? Like I said, a friend of mine this week is at Disney, so he saved up. He saved up his airline miles and he took his family on vacation to Disney for a week. And I think that's great because you have to do things to reward yourself. If you're going to stay diligent and you're going to stay tight and you're going to monitor your money and you're going to increase your income as much as you can, which means usually having a side hustle or a second job. The Dave Ramsey, have a yard sale, sell everything that isn't tied down. There are other ways that you can increase income to be able to pay off debt or to have extra money for what you want to do with it. But you also need to make sure, as you're putting your budget together, what are your long-term goals, not just short-term goals. So, short-term goals, you're going to need, I say, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses sitting in a high interest savings account. And why do I say high interest savings account? Because if you got it in a regular savings account, you're not making any money off of it. So find yourself a high interest savings account, park 3 to 6 months equivalent of expenses in it, so that if an emergency did happen, you're not going to be freaked out. You're not going to be panicked. You're not going to have anxiety. You're not going to be stressed. You're going to say, you know what? This money is there for that. Let's use it, and then we'll replenish it after we're out of this phase of our life. So that's something that's very important to do because that gives you peace of mind and security. Once you have that emergency fund fully allocated, if you do need to use it, use it. Don't feel guilty about it. Please do not put emergency expenses on a credit card when you've got an emergency savings account sitting there. Just don't do it. That doesn't make sense to pay interest when you could be earning interest. So make sure you reallocate those funds to your emergency high yield savings account as soon as you're through that difficult phase of your life. Like I said, you're going to continually monitor and track this. You're going to look at long term, what do you want to do long term? You're going to make adjustments. I say if you have an employer which matches 401k, which by the way, as an employer, I do have a 401k and we do match for our employees. And I tell all of my employees, look, I want you to put in enough to get the full company match. If you don't, then I'm not paying you as much as I want to. I want to invest in your future. I want you to put in a minimum of 6% because that's what we match up to. I want you to put in 6% so that I can match and I can help you to have that financial freedom in the future. Now, is 6% enough? No, it's not. 6% is my minimum recommendation based on my company's matching policy. If you have a company that matches beyond that, that's great. You should maximize that. If you have a company that does not do any 401k matching at all, you still need to be investing in your 401k. My recommendation is when you are young, if you can, 15%. If you can't do 15, do 10. I think all of my kids are at 10%. Part of the reason why they're at 10% instead of 15, even though I'd like them to be at 15, is because they're young professionals, they're starting families, they've got some extra expenses where they need more disposable income available every month, and they just can't quite get to the 15% 401k savings at this point. So they all do 10%, which 10% is fine for where they're at in their phase of life. I will gently remind them, hey, once life stabilizes And I know that's going to be difficult because I know kids go through multiple phases of life where there are large expenditures on them. It was the braces that weren't covered by insurance, and then band instruments. That was something else. So I remember being a large hit to my budget that I had not predicted or planned for. Now, one thing I do predict and plan for, I predict and plan for Christmases, birthdays, and large life events. Your kid is going to turn 15, 16 years old and get a driver's license and need a car at some point. As a parent, you need to be planning for that. Now, I did not buy any of my kids a car. I paid part of my youngest son's under the agreement that he was paying part and I was paying part. So I didn't give him a vehicle, but I did assist him with it. He had asked, "Hey, if I do this, if I do that, will you help me out?" And I agreed to that. But again, I had planned for and budgeted. Another thing you need to plan for and budget is college. If you have a state which has a college investment plan, you should definitely do that. I think it's called a 529. I'll be honest, they weren't available with my kids. My kids are a little bit older, so we didn't have that opportunity. But I do know people that have college accounts started for their kids now. And start out putting $100 a month if you can. If you can't, whatever you can put in. But it's important to help them have the ability to go to college without going into excessive amounts of debt. Creating your and maintaining your budget is going to be ongoing. You've got to constantly evaluate that. Retirement, I hope, is not going to be a surprise to anybody. I think everyone should shoot to retire at 65 minimum. I don't like the idea of someone being 72 and still having to work a full-time job because they didn't plan for retirement. Does it happen? Yeah, my dad still works. He'll probably work till the day he dies, honestly, because he did not plan for retirement. I am planning for retirement at 70. Now, you might say, why 70? Well, 70 is kind of what I'm shooting for based on the fact that I know that I'm a workaholic and I know I'm going to want to work a long time. You know, being a business owner in what I do, we're remote. I can do it from anywhere. I'm not driving to an office every day. I'm not doing physical labor. So I don't see why I can't work to 70 if I choose to. Now, does that mean that I'm planning my 401k strategy out till I'm 70? Actually, no. I've got my 401k. I also have some stocks. I also have a wealth investor who has invested me in some S&P growth stock mutual funds. And then I've got my 3 companies that, of course, I'm invested in. And I'm 100% owner of 2 companies. I'm 51% owner of the 3rd company. And I've done the investment into them just recently. For the first time, have I taken a loan or any money out. I bootstrapped them. I basically self-funded. And that slowed down my growth. And now I'm finally getting some capital cash coming in so we can throttle up on the growth of the company, but debt is debt. And so I'm not a fan of debt. I'm going to use the same strategy of putting together good forecast in place, a good budget, monitoring the variance, paying off the debt as quick as we can, and then having it where the company will be, back to a cash basis again. And I think that's the better way to go, because if at some point, if I decide to sell, then I'll be able to cash out and I'll get all of the money. I won't have to pay down a bank note and pay off debt before I can use that money. So I just want you to kind of think about this. Next time, I'll probably go into some of the fire strategy for how to really engage with living a minimal life so that you can retire as early as possible. There are some people doing the fire movement that have retired in their 30s, some of them in their 40s. That's not something I've chosen to do, but I am going to research it and I'm going to present it to you next time so you have the knowledge and the ability to do that if that's what you choose. Thank you, and leave comments below if you have any questions.